2 hours ago, Trump sat in the Oval Office across from Ireland's Prime Minister and delivered a statement that redefined the diplomatic situation in a single sentence. We don't need any help, actually. 24 hours before that, he had told the world that numerous countries were on their way to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. He had warned that NATO faces a very bad future if allies failed to send warships. He had blasted Britain, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Australia by name. He had called it a very small endeavor, just keeping the strait open, and demanded that the nations benefiting from its oil flows come and protect it themselves. And then, one by one, they said no. Germany said it first and said it bluntest. This is not our war. We have not started it. Britain followed, and stating it would not be drawn into the wider war. France said it would never take part in operations to open the strait. Japan ruled it out. Australia ruled it out. Italy ruled it out. Greece ruled it out. Spain went furthest of all. Spain will never accept any stopgap measures to keep the strait open, because the objective must be for the war to end, and for it to end now. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, delivered the institutional verdict. Member states have no appetite to expand their naval mandate to the Strait of Hormuz. This is not Europe's war, she said, but Europe's interests are directly at stake. That last sentence is the one that should alarm Washington most. Not the refusals themselves, those were predictable. What matters is the reasoning behind them, and what that reasoning tells the world about the state of the alliance that has anchored Western security for 75 years. To understand why the rejections landed with such force, you have to understand what Trump was actually asking, and what European leaders heard when he asked it. Trump's request, issued on Truth Social on Sunday and amplified in a Financial Times interview the same day, was for allies to send warships into the Strait of Hormuz, a 50-kilometer-wide choke point currently studded with Iranian mines, a constant threat from Iranian coastal missiles, drones, and small boat swarms, and operating inside effective Iranian weapons range along its entire length. The German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius captured the military reality in a single question. What does Trump expect a handful or two handfuls of European frigates to do in the Strait of Hormuz that the powerful U.S. Navy cannot do? That is not a rhetorical dodge. It is a genuine strategic question. The U.S. Navy, with its carrier strike groups, its minesweeping assets, its air defense systems, and its command infrastructure, has been unable to reopen the strait in 19 days of war. The notion that 6 German frigates would change the calculus is not a military proposition. It is a political one, a demand for symbolic solidarity that carries real kinetic risk. European governments understood that immediately, and they said with unusual unanimity and unusual bluntness, then that symbolic solidarity in someone else's war is not what their defense establishments are built for. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kallas put the European position in terms that no senior official has stated this directly in the entire post-Cold War era. We haven't been consulted, and we don't really understand what are the objectives of this war. That sentence, spoken by the EU's top diplomat about a war launched by America, America's closest institutional partner, is the most significant public rupture in transatlantic relations since the 2003 Iraq invasion. And it was delivered not in anger, but in the measured bureaucratic language of genuine institutional bewilderment. Trump's response to the rejections went through 3 distinct phases in 48 hours, and each phase revealed something different about how the White House is processing the alliance breakdown. Phase 1. Escalation. On Sunday, Trump told the Financial Times that a negative response from allies will be very bad for the future of NATO. He explicitly linked the Hormuz request to U.S. commitment to Ukrainian defense, the one area where European capitals are most vulnerable to American leverage. Senator Lindsey Graham, speaking after a direct conversation with Trump, said he had never heard him so angry in his life. Phase 2. Retreat. By Tuesday, sitting in the Oval Office, Trump said, "We don't need any help, actually." The White House issued a statement framing the reversal as principled consistency. The president was resoundingly elected to put America first, and he will continue to bolster U.S. national security through Operation Epic Fury with or without NATO. Phase 3. The pivot to China. Even as Trump declared independence from NATO, his administration continued pressing Beijing to help police the Strait, the same China it was simultaneously threatening with tariffs over the Iran war's economic disruption. China has not responded affirmatively. The three-phase sequence, demand, rejection, retreat, completed itself in under 48 hours. Former Estonian President Toomas Hendrik Ilves identified the core problem publicly. It was a bit rich for Trump to demand help from countries he had previously insulted. Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna asked the question that European capitals are asking privately. What are the strategic goals? What will be the plan? Washington has not answered. And in the absence of an answer, no ally with a functioning government was prepared to put its sailors in the line of Iranian coastal fire for objectives that the requesting country's own president describes in contradictory terms from one press conference to the next. The strait itself has not changed. Around 20% of global oil consumption transits through it. Brent crude has remained above $100 a barrel since Iran effectively closed the waterway on March 2nd. Global gas prices are elevated. American gas prices, Trump's most politically sensitive domestic number, have risen sharply and have not responded to any of the military action taken in 19 days. The Pentagon and National Security Council significantly underestimated Iran's willingness to close the strait when planning Operation Epic Fury, CNN reported last week. That underestimation is now the central operational fact of the war. The U.S. military has struck more than 5,000 targets inside Iran. It has destroyed Iran's Navy, Air Force, and anti-aircraft systems. It has killed 2 supreme leaders' worth of senior leadership in 19 days. And the strait remains closed. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper described the mission in the strait as zeroed in on dismantling Iran's decades-old threat to the free flow of commerce through a combination of air, land, and maritime capabilities. The U.S. military destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels in a single operation on March 10th. It dropped 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on hardened Iranian missile sites along the coastline near the strait on Tuesday. The strait is still closed. Operational reality is what makes the NATO rejection structurally significant, rather than merely diplomatically embarrassing. The U.S. has not been unable to reopen the strait because it lacks European frigates. It has been unable to reopen the strait because Iran has built a layered anti-access system along a 50-kilometer bottleneck that is genuinely difficult to neutralize without escalating to levels, ground operations, occupation of Iranian coastal territory, that no party has yet been willing to authorize. European navies would not change that equation, and what they would do is share the political and military liability for a war they were not consulted on, and whose objectives they do not understand. That is the calculation every NATO capital made. And every NATO capital, independently, reached the same answer. The deepest damage from the Hormuz standoff is not operational. It is institutional, and it may outlast the war itself. NATO was designed, as Luxembourg's Foreign Minister Xavier Bettel said with unusual directness, as a defensive alliance, not a mechanism for one member to launch a war of choice and then obligate the rest to share the consequences. I want to remind that none of us has been directly attacked, Bettel said. There are no grounds to invoke Article 5. That statement from the foreign minister of one of NATO's smallest members articulates the legal and institutional boundary that every European capital drew in the past 48 hours. Trump's war on Iran, launched without NATO consultation, without a formal Article 5 trigger, and without a defined exit strategy, falls outside the alliance's founding mandate. The Allies are not abandoning NATO. They are defining what NATO is and is not, and doing so in direct, public, on-the-record language that has no precedent in the alliance's history. Trump responded by threatening the alliance's future. But the threat itself revealed the bind. A NATO that functions only when all members support every American military decision is not an alliance. It is a subscription service. And the European members have just served notice that they read the contract differently. Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre framed it cleanly. We are not part of this war. We did not initiate it, but we are all affected by it. It should be the responsibility of the concerned parties to find ways of ending the hostilities. The concerned parties, in the Norwegian formulation, are the United States and Israel, not the 30 other nations whose oil supply, economic stability, and defense relationships are being reshaped by a war they were not consulted on. 2 hours ago, Trump said, "America doesn't need help." The Allies said the same thing in their own language 48 hours earlier. The difference is that when the Allies said it, they meant it as a principled position. When Trump said it, Lindsey Graham had just reported he had never heard him angrier. One of those two responses describes a managed alliance relationship. The other describes something that is being stress-tested in real time, and that is not yet broken, but is carrying weight it was not designed to bear.